Welcome to the Floyd County Police Department. My name is Chris Fincher. I am the Public Information Officer with the agency. I have with me today Ansley Silvers. She is with Floyd Against Drugs. She is also with Highland Rivers. Thank you for joining us today, Ansley.
Thank you, Chris.
So with Floyd Against Drugs, you are the president
of
that board. And with Highland Rivers, you are the director of addictive services. How do those work together? How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting because one side of it is treatment and the other side of it is more prevention. So I've been with Highland Rivers for almost 20 years, and I have been with Floyd Against Drugs for about 5 years as a board member, and this is my second year as the president.
Right. And what exactly does Floyd Against Drugs do for our community and in our community?
Floyd Against Drugs has been in the community of Rome for about 20 years, well, right at 20 years. And what we are working towards is to strengthen and build a drug-free community by offering education on prevention, targeting our children and youth. We look at it as investing in our future. And so the last couple of years, we've developed a mission to, or a strategic plan to start informing more adults and parents so that they are aware of the current trends going on with our children and youth.
Yep. So Floyd Against Drugs, you may have seen some of their billboards and the advertisements that they do. They have billboards on the highways. But they also go into the liquor stores to just to let people know that it's against the law to sell and to give to an underage person. You've also been out at other fairs and things giving away swag, lanyards and things like that, right?
Absolutely. Red Ribbon Week is coming up. We have several events that we have throughout the year just to kind of keep nudging our community and being a drug-free community. And
that's why you're with us today, is to talk about an awareness day that's coming up at the end of the month. It's August 31st, correct?
Correct.
It's International Overdose Awareness Day. And what exactly, we all know what overdose is. What kind of impact does overdose have in our community?
Our family personally has had to say goodbye to 3 different children
right.
That were involved in our family over the course of about 5 years, the most recent being this past Friday. And so it hits home for a lot of people, but I think there's such a stigma along with drug use that a lot of people just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we do talk about it, and we do raise awareness that we have some very inquisitive youth and teenagers in our community, just like you and I were
right.
not so long ago, and that we are letting them know of the dangers and how quickly you can not only lose your life, but lose your quality of life that you once had.
Right. The availability of prescription pills has become such that's how a lot of people are dying. They're mixing things, but it's also not only with the prescription pills, but there's an introduction of fentanyl, which is even more deadly.
Fentanyl is very, very scary. And the last drug burn that Floyd Against Drugs had, I cannot tell you how much fentanyl we were able to get off the streets, and it wasn't illicit fentanyl. It was prescribed for someone who was at the end stages of life. But interestingly, more than half of our youth, that's where they get their drugs that they start experimenting with, is from their family and friends and from the medicine cabinets. And so it's critical that we know what those current trends are, and we know what the risks are, and that we're keeping them locked up and we're disposing of them properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're talking about family that may have a terminal illness, but also things that they may have something going on where they want to continue their quality. They want to continue to be productive, so they have to They have to take things to continue their life. Right? That's what you're talking about.
Right. And I think sometimes people kind of misconstrue the messaging is that we are educated right now on the mortality rate of those that are abusing opioids. There's certainly a medicinal value to it. And we, Floyd Against Drugs or myself as an addiction counselor, we're not a doctor. But what we are going to tell you and what we know is that opioids and benzodiazepines, any medication that is mood altering, can be abused. And it's not always being abused by someone who should know better. Because if you look at our youth and our teenagers and the developing brain, the questions and the inquisitiveness is science shows that is where drug use, not addiction, drug use starts, is in a developing brain.
What are some examples of some opioids in the prescription world?
Oh, examples would be hydrocodone, Tylenol 3 is going to have an opioid in it, fentanyl, morphine, and then there's synthetics, out there that can be abused, such as methadone. What we do see over the course of time is that once we identify that one drug is causing a problem, then we turn around and restrict that drug. Well, in turn, what's going to happen is these brilliant minds behind the scene are going to come up with something else and then something else. And so the sooner that we try to restrict one drug, such as, doctors prescribing opioids, then we're going to see an influx in fentanyl and heroin, something that can be made outside of a pharmaceutical company.
What do opioids do to the body?
They actually go in and suppress your opioid receptors. They're a depressant. And so they're going to go in and suppress your opioid receptors in your brain so that you are more relaxed and you don't feel pain.
I got you. So that's why they're effective with people with cancer or some type of, after a surgery, for example.
Exactly. It doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes you think that the pain has gone away.
And over time, I understand there's some, you may not know these stats, but over extended use of opioids, the likelihood is that you're going to become more addictive to it the more you take it, right?
Exactly. Your body does start to become dependent. There's a pharmacology, biological aspect of it where your body does start to become dependent on this medication. And so when you cease taking that medicine, you're going to start experiencing some very unpleasant physical withdrawals.
I got you.
Right.
What would withdrawals look like?
Typically what we see with opioid withdrawals is a lot of gastrointestinal distress, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, sweating, shaking.
It sounds like the flu.
It does sound like the flu. And because these withdrawals can be so unpleasant and so severe, we see a lot of relapse that goes on and a lot of supplementing. A lot of people will run to the gas station and buy Kratom because they have found that Kratom, which is legal in Georgia, will actually go in and stop these withdrawal symptoms.
So we were talking about coming off of it, and this kind of falls in line with our discussion of overdose. Somebody that regularly takes an opioid, they're taking a certain amount every day, then they stop, then they come back, but they come back at the same level they were at before. That's where we see some overdoses, right?
Exactly. So over time, when you start abusing or overly using a substance, your body does become chemically dependent on it, and so you do build up a tolerance. And so once you enter any kind of stage of sobriety, your tolerance begins to decrease. Well, when you in turn try to have just, one more, which we never, ever will support or recommend, but we do see a lot of fatalities with that, where someone will have some sobriety, return to the drug use that they were used to and the amounts that they were using, and it becomes fatal.
Right.
Yeah.
So is this where medically assisted prescriptions come into play, or medically assisted recovery comes into play?
It is, and there's several trends that have been developed over the last couple of years as alternatives to complete abstinence in treatment. And there are some medications that are being used and probably should be used more. But there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of restrictions on it right now that will stop those cravings. And so they are effective. You know, buprenorphine, Suboxone, Subutex, those are things that will actually go in and suppress those cravings on the areas of your brain. And so it will increase the chances of you staying sober. And how I like to describe it to people is that if you have someone depressed and you give them an antidepressant so that they're able to get out and go see their therapist, the antidepressant is effective because it's targeting those areas of the brain so the person can get up and continue to seek help. These medications, when used in conjunction with treatment, you know, are pretty much the same. You know, it takes that debilitating factor away so that you can get up and go to treatment.
But it's all about making that move to get up and realize you need help and to go out and seek some help somewhere.
Exactly. And that's the fighting of the stigma, is that it is okay to say, I have a problem with this and I need help.
Because it sounds like if you try to do it cold turkey, you're going to probably have a good bit of setbacks, and it's better if you have that support system in place.
Exactly. You know, I would love to say that the chances of long-term sobriety is just changing your way of thinking and putting it down and walking away and life being better. And for some people that does happen. In my field, it doesn't happen often. You have to have some kind of therapy and support to get you through those hard times. And it's okay. It's okay to need support, and it's okay to use it. I would much rather you seek treatment or you seek help or you help someone get to that point than to hear of an overdose and a death.
And it's nice to know that in our community we have people who have gone through recovery who are now helping others.
We have a huge support network in our community of people that are right there in recovery. I was lucky enough to not have to live with the disease of addiction, but I certainly have people very close to me that do. And I think it takes us all. It takes law enforcement. It takes people in recovery with their own personal stories. It takes, addictionologists and treatment professionals, that if we work together and show that there is hope and there are options, the likelihood of people living to their fullest potential is going to happen.
Now, you called it a disease.
I do.
Why,
I do believe it's a
why
disease.
do you call it a disease?
I do. I do believe that it's a brain disease. I don't, in the 30 years that I've been doing this, I have never met anyone that said that when they grew up, or that when they were a child, that when they grew up, that they wanted to be addicted to drugs and alcohol. And science has proven over and over again that there are genetic factors in addiction. Just like diabetes and just like heart disease and just like male pattern baldness or the color of your eyes, or, there are genetic factors that can make your body respond differently when a mood-altering substance enters the body. Just like someone who becomes a diabetic, they are unknowingly eating a candy bar, and I eat a candy bar and my body responds normal, and I go on about my business. And then somebody eats a candy bar and all of a sudden they're a diabetic. They didn't choose for that to happen. They chose to eat the candy bar, but they didn't choose how their body would chemically respond to that. And so that's the easiest way that I can describe it, as a disease, and it's treatable.
So let's talk about overdose.
Yes.
Let's start with some basics. What are some signs of overdose that If you're with somebody and you start to see this, what are some signs that someone can be aware of?
Let's talk about two different drugs that we're seeing right now. We're seeing depressants and narcotics, and so the depressants would be opioids, right? And so what you would want to look at is if someone has had slow breathing, is not responsive, um, maybe has stopped breathing, that their skin looks pale or gray or blue.
So when you say slow breathing, would that have some snoring that may occur with that as
there
well?
might be some snoring, strange snoring, strange sounds, shallow breathing. And so what we recommend is that if you're not able to wake someone, that you go and you apply a sternum rub, and you take your fist and you rub it very hard on their sternum. It doesn't feel good. And so usually if someone's just in a deep sleep, that's going to wake them up and they're not going to be happy with you. If they don't respond to that, then more than likely you're dealing with a very critical emergency. And so you do need to get 911 on their way.
Overdose from a narcotic side, what would it look like?
Narcotics, you're going to see sweating, rapid heart rate. You're going to see maybe nausea, chest pains, anxiety. The difference between a narcotic overdose and an opioid overdose is an opioid, there is an antidote for that called Narcan. And so we encourage a lot of people to get a hold of Narcan, whether it's through the Georgia Overdose Prevention Group or through their pharmacy.
Narcan is
naloxone, and it's antidote. So if someone has overdosed on an opioid, this kind of comes in like an army and knocks it off those particular brain cells, and it wakes the person up.
Is one shot going to do it? Or
Not always. We've had in our kits that I have seen that there's usually 2 doses. And so if the first dose isn't effective after about 2 to 3 minutes, you want to administer the second one. We've had some cases, especially like with fentanyl, that 10, 20, 30, 40 doses have had to be given to keep a person alive.
Now, what if someone is not suffering from overdose? Is the Narcan going to hurt them at all?
Not at all. Not at all. Narcan is only going to go in and knock opioids off the receptors. Right. If the opioids are not on your receptors, then you're good.
So what type of applications do we have of Narcan? There's 2 different types that I know of, right? You've got some that's intravenous, but there's also some that has the nasal spray.
Nasal.
Right?
And nasal seems to be the most popular right now and is distributed from all of our local pharmacies. And that's because it's more affordable than the auto-injectors and easier to use. And some people think that it won't be effective because, a person may not be breathing. Administer it up the nose. If they're not breathing, it's still going to be absorbed. It's still going to do its job.
From the perspective of the police department, we've had several occasions where officers have gone out and we've had to administer Narcan. It's taken several doses of Narcan, but in those cases, it's been very effective for those officers.
Right.
We're talking about traffic stops. There's been other times where the police officer has been the first one to arrive before EMS got there, and we were able to go ahead and start that process. So the quicker you get to it and the quicker you get attention to somebody, the better their chances are, right?
Exactly, because, it could take hours for an overdose to happen, but when you arrive on a scene, you don't know how long that person's been there, and so the faster you act, the better. I know a month ago, and we live in a subdivision, emergency EMS crowds our neighbors, and we find out that there had been an opioid overdose, and luckily they had enough Narcan to counteract that. And so a couple hours later, I go to visit a friend in another neighborhood, and there's EMS swarming a house again, and so there's another overdose. And so that tells me is potentially we've got a bad batch in our community, and it's taking people out right and left. And my concern was, do we have enough on Narcan?
There's been some concern if there is an overdose in the presence of friends. There's been some concern about people going to jail. There is an amnesty law that protects people from that, so that we do get care to people who need it at that time.
There's a medical amnesty law that has been in Georgia since 2014. If you are acting in good faith, whether it's an opioid overdose or a stimulant overdose, if there has been any kind of an overdose, drugs or alcohol, call for help. Even if you are underage or you're in possession, you have protection under the medical amnesty law because you acted in good faith. You know, people get scared. They think, oh, well, I'm going to get caught and then I'm going to be in trouble, or I'm on probation, or, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. At that point, the only thing that matters is saving that other person's life.
Right.
That's it.
So what if a family or friends don't have Narcan? What can they do to best save that person? Obviously, call 911, alert somebody to a problem.
Immediately call 911.
What positions should you put that person in? What's the best way to save that person?
Actually, if you come across someone and you suspect an overdose, and you are trying to determine if they're breathing or if their heart is beating, if they are breathing, and you've called 911, go ahead and roll them over onto their left side and put them in the recovery position. At that point, if they tend to vomit, they won't aspirate. They're in the recovery position. They're on their left side. Their legs drawn up so they can't roll over into any body fluids, and wait with them until help gets there.
So that recovery system is a person's laying on their left side.
Right.
Their right leg is crossed over. That prevents them from rolling over. And their hand or their arm is under their head to keep their head propped up, right?
Right. Just like if you went to lie down on your left side and you had your left arm under your head, using it as a makeshift pillow. Yeah.
Don't try to give the person water. Don't try to feed them ice chips.
Do not. Yeah. You know, especially those of us that are mamas, we want to, you know, oh, well, let me get you some water or some ice, or maybe
you want to be actively doing something.
Exactly. And so it's really important to just don't, you know, just stay with them, call for help, monitor them. If they stop breathing, then you want to start administering rescue breaths.
Our concern and our priority is saving lives. That's really why we're here, is to save lives. And again, that's why we're here today, is to talk about International Overdose Awareness Day. That is on August 31st. We care about it every day, not just on August 31st, but we really want to talk about some awareness on that day.
Yeah, we just want our community to know that no one is immune from this impacting someone close to them. It does happen here. And you know, we all get caught up in the throes of life, and, you know, our COVID pandemics and everything. But, you know, drug use is here. It's next door. It's next to you in church. It's across your desk.
Yeah.
And it happens, and the odds of you coming across it are great. And what we ask you to do is to be proactive to save this life. It's not to change any bad decisions that they're making. It's not to be a treatment provider. It's simply to save a life so that they can get to that point where they get better.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've included some tips and some advice in this podcast. We're also going to provide some links after to some other resources. So, Angeli, thank you for being with us at the police department. Thank you all, and please be safe. Remember August the 31st, and remember just to care for your loved ones and be there for them if they need it. So, thank you very much. Have a good day.